Every single time, I personally think, I think I could like this president, and I don't think the Republicans have a chance anyway. And so even though I can't stand Obamacare, and I can't stand the hypocrisies of his administration, of which I can name you many, many, but the two specifics that come to mind have to do with his campaign financing holier-than-thou attitude, in which the first happened on his first campaign run, in which he said he would accept government matching funds, and then he opted out of that as soon as he realized he could raise more money than government matching funds would allow. That was numero uno, hypocritical. And numero dos, hypocritical, was recently when he went crazy over the Citizens United 5-4 United States Supreme Court case, which held that corporations are people, and therefore donations by corporations to political campaigns could not be restricted, upending what had been an understanding for many years in Washington, D.C. about what the campaign laws were. By the way, the Supreme Court said definitively, and this is really important, they said definitively one could not constitutionally restrict the amount of money a corporation could spend on a campaign, because that would be a restriction on speech, because spending money allows you to get your message out. In a way, spending money is speech. That is the reasoning of the 5-4 decision. But in that same decision, they said, but Congress could make a law constitutionally to mandate disclosure of where the money was coming from. Well, President Obama, for all of his power, and the Republicans, for all of their domination of the House, none of them have made that a law. Instead, they've been very happy to form these PACs under euphemistic opposite names. For example, you're in trouble when it says Americans for Better Health Care. They're trying to gut Medicare, right? Am I right? I mean, they always come up with these opposite titles. It's very Goebbels-like. It's very propaganda-like. You got to be careful of these titles. So in the wake of Citizens United, President Obama came out. This was hysterical. Remember when he dissed Alito during this State of the Union the year before? I mean, he was so angry and so angry. But you know what? The Democrats turned around and did the same thing the Republicans did. And they formed all these PACs, and they have not mandated disclosure. So they're doing the same thing the Republicans are doing. So the hypocrisy of the Obama administration is something that I've known about, that you've known about, and it's rather sickening. But it tells you that this person is a person that has very little in the way of core principles, because when it comes right down to it, his principles are always available for barter, given the situation. He's a pragmatist. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. That's who he is. When it comes to leadership on Israel, his record has been abysmal. Absolutely abysmal. He completely disrespected Netanyahu, the first visit to the White House. You remember Netanyahu basically left at the back door, and the big hullabaloo over that. Also, the first call that he made in the White House was to an Arab, it was to not PLO, but to Abbas, and it was not to our supposed friend of Benjamin Netanyahu. And one can see systematically that President Obama's concern, his foremost concern, is making the Arab world happy with respect to the existence of Israel. But I want to say that his speech today is sending ruffles of outright fear, and I am not overreacting or exaggerating when I tell you this, throughout the people who love Israel in this country. And I count among them Christians as well as Jews, many Christians as well as Jews, many Christians who not only have a philosophical alliance with the way Israel is run and a respect for the fact that since Israel has taken over Jerusalem, their great religious historical sites have been open to the public, which they were not in prehistoric 1967 border times. When the Arabs held Israel, it was not open to people of all faiths at all. And I'm talking about the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I'm talking about Bethlehem. I'm talking about, well, Bethlehem was a different part, but I'm talking about parts of East Jerusalem that are very, very holy to the Christian faith. But my larger point is that since President Obama got to office, he has not been very good to people who have been his historic friends. I would even count among that the UK, England, in which he divulged nuclear state secrets to Russia in return for a START treaty. Lots of other examples in which people that you would expect that he would respect as our historical friends have not been treated as such. Whereas people that have not historically been our friends have been treated as if they had the red carpet rolled down to them, including that very famous picture, which you can find on video on YouTube, of President Obama bowing from the hip down to the Saudi prince. And don't think that anybody who's ever seen that would forget that picture. You go up, look up on YouTube video, Saudi prince bowing Obama, and you will see it for yourself, because it's a picture from his rear end and he goes all the way down. And since when does a leader of the free world ever bow to anyone, much less a Saudi prince? So we understand his own, if not allegiances, certainly sympathies, in a way that is scary, compromisingly scary to those of us who view the world in a different way. So, today he made a speech. And in today, he rejected, President Netanyahu, in response to the Obama speech, rejected what President Obama said. Now, do we have a clip, Julia, of the speech? All right, we're going to play the clip for you.
No, I have the 1967.
Yeah, I want to hear what President Obama said today with respect to 1967 borders.
The United States believes that negotiations should result in two states with permanent Palestinian borders with Israel, Jordan, and Egypt, and permanent Israeli borders with Palestine. We believe the borders of Israel and Palestine should be based on the 1967 lines with mutually agreed swaps, so that secure and recognized borders are established for both states. The Palestinian people must have the right to govern themselves and reach their full potential in a sovereign and contiguous state. I am aware that these steps alone will not resolve the conflict, because two wrenching and emotional issues will remain: the future of Jerusalem and the fate of Palestinian refugees. But moving forward now on the basis of territory and security provides a foundation to resolve those two issues in a way that is just and fair, and that respects the rights and aspirations of both.
Okay, I just want to say, just parsing his words a little bit, contiguous borders of a so-called Palestine, which is interesting because if you look in history, there really was no Palestine. Palestine was a British occupational word of a territory that was called that for a while during part of the early 20th century. And what was Palestine actually became Transjordan, which became Jordan in 1947. Jordan, by the way, is a country, is a regime, is a sheikdom, whatever you want to call it, that was parsed out of the same bits of land when they gave Israel a little bit. And if you look at a map, Jordan's far bigger land-wise than Israel. Israel is the smallest by far in the region. Take a look, you'll see what I mean. Lebanon's a different shape. Not that much bigger, but still bigger. But Israel is teeny tiny. I always tell you to go to the map when it comes to this. Interestingly enough, he uses the word contiguous. There's no contiguous way for Gaza to get to the West Bank without hip-scopping and stamping over Israel. Israel proper. So that's going to be an interesting concept that he raised in a speech that's going to also shoot fear through a lot of people and give ammunition to those people who would like to see the elimination of Israel. You know what many people forget is that the reason that these are called pre-67 and post-67 borders is because in 1967, the joint forces of Egypt and Syria and Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Lebanon, all 5 countries, were amassing on their respective borders with Israel in order to eliminate the state of Israel. And so Israel, seeing this, one-upped them and in 6 days managed to not only take the enemy out, but to take territory away from them. Now, the territory to the north, which is called the Golan Heights, borders Syria, that territory is very important because it's higher than the rest of Israel. And so therefore Israel having that territory, which by the way has been used for the most beautiful fruit farms and orchards and magnificent cotton that you've ever seen. I mean, Israel's turned everything that it owns into green. You need to go there to see the miracle that is the state of Israel. I don't exaggerate. It's quite beautiful. It's quite extraordinary. From sand to trees. That's what they've done. You could literally go down a road and say, what's on that side? And they would say Arab territory, and it looks like the desert it's been for thousands of years. And on the left-hand side, there's plum trees and peach trees and grapevines mines and vineyards and beautiful things, and that's Israel, because that's what Israel has done. That's the miracle of Israel, which is really not a miracle at all. It's hard work and ingenuity and brilliance and hard work. Since 1948, they've turned the desert into green. They've turned it into a Gan Eden, a Garden of Eden. Anyway, so there's no way that Israel can strategically even begin to think about giving back the Golan Heights, because then the Syrians would be looking down at Israel, which they did prior to 1967, which is why it was so dangerous for Israel, which is why every time they turned around, they were being fired on. And don't forget, there are that many more people in these places now than there were 40 years ago. Now, I will tell you that I believe that it's theoretically possible to have a peaceful solution with the Palestinians on the West Bank, because I know that the people in Israel know exactly what large settlements need to remain in Israel proper, where the borders can be negotiated, and the squiggly wiggly line that might not be quite contiguous but would sort of work. I believe that they know that on both sides. The problem is you need a willing partner on the other side. And so what people fail to realize in all of this is that it presumes a rational partner on the other side. We all had great hopes for Mahmoud Abbas to be that rational partner, because we knew that Arafat was not. Had he been one, he would have made peace during the Clinton administration. But he would rather have kept his $13 billion in a Geneva bank and made sure his wife, Sufi, and his daughter were alive and well in Paris. And he was a terrorist to the end. And that's what he should be remembered by and for and about by his people. The architect of the Munich massacre of the Israeli athletes was a terrorist to the end. Abbas inherited this mantle, but because of his personality, because of his character, people thought that he was maybe the figure that could turn war into peace. Maybe, even though he was an inheritor of Arafat, he was a more reasonable man. Instead, what has happened in the past few weeks shows the extent to which his own people don't support him. They don't want that rational person who wants peace. They would rather go with the Hamas. When the Gaza Strip was given back to their own people, they had a choice. They didn't have to vote the Hamas people in who said we want the elimination of the state of Israel. They could have voted for a more moderate regime and said, we reject that. We acknowledge that Israel is here and here to stay. They made choices. We have free will. We believe in that in this country, do we not? We believe that our decisions have consequences. That's the way we raise our children. That's basically the freedom loving that is America, all about taking individual responsibility for our choices and then having consequences. Well, the Gazans made a choice, and their choice had consequences. The consequences have been that their people continue to live in squalor, not only in non-freedom. The women are worth nothing. They have 10 babies a person. They die in childbirth. You can see documentary after documentary. Hamas has not helped their own people, but this is what they chose. This is what they want. So now Hamas joins with Abbas on the West Bank. How is Israel supposed to rationally make peace? Notwithstanding President Obama's lofty phrases. Where does this leave Israel if President Obama is throwing Israel under the bus now and saying this is what you have to concede to? I am embarrassed. I am disappointed. I am infuriated. I don't know how to think or behave, but I will tell you one thing. The Jewish community and the people that love Israel in this country are absolutely in shock and absolutely appalled at this speech of President Obama today. It's going to have significant repercussions.